Hello everyone. We are continuing with the chapter of pollination and fertilization, and today this is the D part of this pollination and fertilization. Yesterday we have studied about the wind pollinated and the insect pollinated plants, that is about entomophily and anemophily. See here, children, today we will see the difference between these insect pollinated flowers or entomophilous and wind pollinated flowers or anemophilous. Flowers are large, bright, colored, if small, present in clusters. In insect pollinated flowers, see the flowers are very large and brightly colored and they are present in small clusters. Here in wind pollinated flowers are small and usually not colored or green. Produce scent and nectar. Insect pollinated flowers, they produce scent and nectar to attract the insects. And in wind pollinated, they do not produce scent or nectar. Anthers are small and remain within the flower, firmly attached to the filament. Here the anthers are in insect pollinated flowers. Anthers are very small and they remain within the flower and they are attached to the filament very firmly. In wind pollinated, anthers are large and protrude out of the flowers and are loosely attached to the filament. They are large, they protrude out of the flower so that they can easily be blown away by the wind. Pollen grains are rough and sticky. In insect pollinated flowers, pollen grains are rough and sticky. And here the pollen grains are light and dry so that they can be easily carried away or blown by the wind. Pollen grains are produced in small quantities. In insect pollinated, they are produced in small quantities, but here they are produced in large quantities because much of the pollen grain are wasted in movement or from one place to another. Stigmas are sticky, flat and club shaped, and stigmas are large, feathery and hang out of the flower. These here the stigmas are large, they are feathery and hang out of the flower so that they can trap the pollen grains which are moving away in the wind. Essential roles are not much exposed. Here male and female parts are exposed to the wind. An example is salvia, pea, petunia, and here it is maize, wheat, pine, etc. Today we will study about ornithophily, that means pollination by birds. There are only a few flowers pollinated by birds as in canna, begonia. Only some flowers they are pollinated by birds, and example is canna and begonia. In such plants, the following characteristics are present. Now we'll see the characteristics of ornithophily. The flowers are usually present in groups. Here they are present in groups. They are bright colored or produce abundant nectar for the attraction of birds. As these flowers are pollinated by birds, they are brightly colored and they produce abundant nectar so that they can attract the birds for pollination. The pollen grains are produced in large quantities so as to ensure the process of pollination. Here, the pollen grains are produced in large quantities. The floral parts are leathery and corolla is funnel shaped. You can see here the corolla is funnel shaped and this bird is taking nectar from this flower. Now, chiropterophily. Chiropterophily means the pollination by bats. It is cross pollination performed by way of bats. So this pollination is done by bats. The bats bring about pollination only in the tropical plants. The bat pollinated flowers are large and strongly scented as the bats are nocturnal. So this cross pollination is done by the bats and the flowers are large and they are strongly scented so that they can attract the birds. Behunia megalendra. They produce abundant nectar and pollen. These flowers they produce, these are not plants, they produce abundant nectar and pollen. Melacophily, it is a pollination brought about by the snails. And see, pollination is done by snails also. So this is known as melacophily, and example is Arisema. Flowers of Rafflesia found in Burma. Rafflesia is the largest flower, as you all know, and this Rafflesia is found in Burma and Indonesia. And these flowers, they are pollinated by the elephant. So elephant is an animal and pollination is done by this elephant. The flowers of Rafflesia are found on the ground. These flowers are found on the ground, and the pollen grains stick to the feet of elephants and are carried to the stigma of other flowers, bringing about cross pollination. Now see here, this Rafflesia, as it is the largest flower, it is found on the ground, and the pollen grains stick to the feet of the elephants, and these elephants and are carried to the stigma of the other flowers, bringing about cross pollination. So in Rafflesia, this cross pollination is brought about by elephants. Now another method is artificial pollination, and this artificial pollination is done by the plant breeders, or we can say that by the farmers. Man plays an important role in bringing about pollination artificially for producing useful and better varieties. So, see here, artificial pollination is brought about by this human being, and this is done to produce a better variety or a useful variety. Pollen grains from the mature anther of a flower from better yielding quality plants are carefully removed. See here what happens. The pollen grains from the mature anthers, they are removed, uh, of that is of better quality, and they are removed. After removing, they are dusted on the mature stigma of the other plant belonging to same or related species. Now see, the pollen grains which are removed from the anther, now they are dusted on the stigma by of the other plant belonging to the same or related species. So in this way, all the plants which produce or the better qualities of the plants, from there the anthers are carefully removed and they are dusted on the stigma to produce a better and healthy variety. These pollinated flowers are now covered with polythene bags till fruits and seeds are produced. Now they are covered with a polythene bag so that no more further this any other pollen grain should reach the stigma. So they are covered by the polythene bags, and they are covered till they produces the fruits and seeds. This method is very common in the garden plants. Now here see children, there is a difference between cross self-pollination and cross-pollination, and it is very important. Self-pollination, pollen grains are transferred from the anthers to the stigma of the same flower or the flower of the same plant. Here you all know children, in self-pollination, transfer of pollen grains takes place to the stigma of the same flower or another flower of the same plant. Pollen grains from the anther of one flower are transferred to the stigma of another flower present on the different plant. Now here the transfer of pollen grains takes place from one plant to another plant of the same variety or same species variety. Both the anthers and stigma mature simultaneously. Here anthers and stigma mature simultaneously, and here they mature at the different times. Here they are maturing at the same time in self pollination, and in cross pollination they mature at different time. It can occur even in the closed flowers. See, self pollination can occur in the closed flower. We have seen there in this previous chapter. It always occur when the flowers open. So cross pollination always occur when the flowers open. No external agent is needed in self-pollination, but here biotic and abiotic agents are required for this cross-pollination. It is very economical for the plants. Here there is no wastage of pollen grains, only a small amount of pollen grains are produced, but here it is not economical as there is a lot of wastage in the production of numerous pollen, nectar, scent, and color. So all these things have to be produced in the flowers which are pollinated, which are cross pollinated. It cannot eliminate useless or harmful characters. So in self pollination, there the same characters continue from heredity to heredity in self pollination, but here it can eliminate useless or harmful characters. Highly useful characters get preserved in the race. So useful characters are preserved in the race, and here useful characters may not be preserved in the race because there is mixing, or we can say there is a cross pollination. It does not produce any variations. No varieties are produced in self pollination, but here it introduces variations in the offsprings. Yield of the plants generally fail in successive generation, as uh, in the self pollination the yield of the plants generally fall in first season, or in one season if it is producing 10 bags of crops, in the next it will produce less. So in this way the yield decreases, but here there is no fall. See, the yield does not fall below an average minimum. It never helps in the production of new varieties and species. So in self pollination, no new varieties are, or species are produced here, but here it helps in the formation of new varieties and species. So new varieties and species are produced in cross pollination. See children, study this table, it is very important. And now we will see the advantages of cross pollination. As you have seen the differences, many new variety in between self pollination and cross pollination. Here in cross pollination, many new healthy varieties can be produced, variations are there. Now cross pollination is preferred over self pollination. Why this cross pollination is preferred? Why over self pollination? It results in healthier offsprings. The first reason is that it results in healthier offspring. So healthier offsprings are produced in cross pollination. It helps to produce new variations and recombinations, some of which are very useful. So here, as from this in cross pollination, what happens, the anther, the pollen grains of another plant reaches the stigma of another plant, so new variations and recombinations are produced, and they are very useful. New and improved varieties of plants can be produced by this method. Here, as there is cross pollination, so there is a mixing of the new varieties. So new and improved varieties of plants can be produced by this method. The plants produced from the seeds of cross-pollinated flowers are more resistant to diseases and other unfavorable conditions. Here the plants produced from the seeds. Here in this cross-pollination, what happens? The plants are more resistant to diseases and other unfavorable conditions. The seeds produced by cross pollination are much better, usually larger, healthy, and more vigorous. See here in cross pollination, this seeds are larger and they are healthy. So disease resistant, the seeds are whatever the seeds are produced, they are disease resistant, they are of better quality, they are larger in size, they are healthy. So all these happens in cross pollination, cross pollinated plants. The seeds produced by cross pollination are much numerous. See, here numerous, as in cross pollination, you have seen that a lot of these pollen grains are wasted. But the seeds which are produced by the cross pollinations are much numerous. So, numerous seeds can be produced by cross pollination. The yield of such seed is very high and never falls below an average minimum. So the yield which is produced is much higher, and they never falls below an average minimum. In self pollination, you have seen that after certain time the yield starts falling, the yield starts decreasing, but here the yield never fall below an average minimum. Now, the disadvantages of cross pollination. It is not a sure method. See, it is not, this cross pollination is not a sure method because the flower has to depend upon the external agents. Plants have to depend upon certain external agencies for pollination, which may or may not be available at the proper time. See, plants have to depend on external agents for pollination, and it, whether the agent is available at that time or not, so it is not a sure method whether the pollination will occur or not. A large quantity of pollens need to be produced to ensure cross pollination, much of which goes waste. Here, a large amount or large quantity of pollen grains are required because they have to move from one place to another, and to so much of them they are wasted. It is less economical. The plants have to develop many devices such as scent, nectar, color, petals, etc., to attract various pollinating these agencies. See, this is not economical because plant have to develop many this we can say devices, or it has to produce more scent, nectar, and it has colored petals, so for attracting the pollinating agents, so it is less economical. Many good characters of the plants may also be lost in the recombination, as it is a recombination takes place in this cross pollination. So what happens is, children, many useful characters of the plant, they are lost in such recombination. So these are the disadvantages of cross pollination. In another session we will study about fertilization. So here we end this session. Thank you.